I was sorting through my empty pill bottles when my phone rang. 5 years since I'd heard that ringtone. 5 years since I deleted his number, erased his texts, burned every photo, but the sound still cut through me like glass. I knew who it was before I looked at the screen. The television was playing in the background, some interview, some celebration of his success. I'd been trying to ignore it, but the volume was too high, and his voice filled my tiny apartment like it had never left. And now, Mr. Harrison, we're going to do something fun. We're going to scroll through your contacts and let fate decide who we call. I froze, watching as the host reached for his phone on screen. The audience laughed. Nathan smiled, that polished, practiced smile that had once made me believe I was special. The phone in my hand vibrated again. I looked at the screen and saw his name, Nathan. Not a block number, not a spoof call. His name. The host on TV was holding up his phone, triumphant. And the lucky number is this one. Let's see who answers. I'd heard of this game. Random contact, live on air. The ultimate test of who still mattered in someone's life. My finger hovered over the answer button. On screen, the phone was ringing. The host was grinning. Nathan's face had gone pale. I'd know that expression anywhere. The mask had slipped, just for a second. They didn't know. They had no idea. They just called his ex-wife. The woman he'd divorced 5 years ago. The woman he'd replaced. The woman everyone assumed was dead. I'd been invisible for 5 years. Completely gone. And now, on live television, he was about to prove to the world that I no longer existed. I answered. Hello, Nathan. The silence on the other end of the line was thick enough to choke on. On screen, I watched him freeze. The host was still smiling, waiting for a voice to come through the speaker. But Nathan's face had gone from pale to gray. Nathan? Is someone there? He didn't answer. He couldn't. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. I smiled, a thin, brittle thing that didn't reach my eyes. Long time no hear. Looks like you're doing well. He finally found his voice. Why are you? Congratulations on the interview. I kept my voice light, casual, like I was chatting with an old friend. I've been watching. You look good. Aging well. The host looked between Nathan and the phone, her smile starting to falter. Nathan? Who is this? Nathan snatched the phone from her hand, his face darkening. I need to. But I hung up first. I tossed the phone onto the couch and stared at the pile of empty pill bottles on my coffee table, cancer medication, painkillers. The cocktail of drugs that were keeping me alive long enough to die in my own time. 5 years ago, I'd walked out of Nathan Harrison's life with nothing but the clothes on my back and a diagnosis I'd kept secret. I'd disappeared so thoroughly that he'd convinced himself I was dead. And now, thanks to one stupid, impulsive decision, he knew I was still alive. I looked at the TV. The host was scrambling, laughing nervously, trying to save the segment. Nathan was gone, probably backstage, probably already dialing numbers trying to trace my call. I reached for the remote and turned it off. Let him try. In the silence of my apartment, I listened to my own breathing. Shallow, labored, the kind of breathing that reminded me I didn't have much time left. The doctor had said 3 months, maybe less. I looked at the pill bottles again. Empty. I needed to refill my prescription, but the pharmacy was clear across town, and I barely had the energy to stand. Tomorrow. I'd go tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face on the screen, heard his voice in the phone, felt the ghost of his hands on my skin. 5 years. I told myself I was over him. I told myself the cancer had burned away every last trace of love I'd ever felt. But the truth was worse than love. The truth was that I still remembered everything. I remembered the way he'd looked at me on our wedding day, like I was a stranger he'd been forced to marry. I remembered the way he'd spoken to me, the cold precision of his words, the way he'd made me feel like I was a stain on his perfect life. But mostly, I remembered the day I'd left. I'd been sitting in the bathroom of our penthouse, the pregnancy test in my hands, the diagnosis still fresh in my mind. I'd been pregnant, a miracle, given everything, and I'd been dying. I'd had a choice. Stay and let him watch me waste away. Stay and let him hate me for another 5 years. Stay and let my child grow up with a mother who couldn't make it to their graduation. Or leave. Give him the divorce he'd been begging for. Let him move on with the woman he actually loved. Disappear so completely that he'd never have to feel guilty about what he'd done. I'd left the pregnancy test in the trash, packed a single bag, and walked out the door. He'd never known about the baby. He'd never known about the cancer. He'd never known that I'd loved him so much that I'd chosen to disappear rather than make him suffer through my death. And I'd spent the last 5 years wondering if I'd made the right choice. The next morning, I dragged myself to the hospital. My body felt like lead, every step a battle, but I had to get my medication. I couldn't afford another night without the drugs that kept the pain at bay. The oncology ward was crowded, as usual. I sat in the waiting room, my hand pressed to my chest, trying to breathe through the ache. Rachel. I looked up. A nurse was standing in the doorway, her clipboard in her hands. Dr. Chun is ready to see you. I stood, my legs wobbling beneath me, and followed her down the hall. The appointment was routine. Blood work, vitals, a discussion about my pain levels and my appetite, and the color of my urine. Dr. Chun was kind, efficient, and completely honest. Rachel, I'm going to be direct with you. She closed my chart and looked at me with eyes that had seen too much death. The tumor has grown. The treatments aren't working the way we hoped. I want to try a new combination, but I can't promise. I know. I cut her off, my voice steady. I know it's not going to work. She paused. You seem at peace with that. I've had time to make peace. I smiled, a hollow thing. 3 months is enough time to say goodbye. I just need to get my affairs in order. She nodded slowly. I'll have the prescription ready for you in an hour. And Rachel, she reached for my hand. If there's anything you need, anything at all, please let me know. Thank you. I was heading toward the pharmacy when I saw her. Lily. She was coming out of the cardiology wing, a thick envelope in her hands, her face pale and drawn. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. She'd changed, the way people do when they've been through something difficult. But she recognized me. She stopped mid-step, her eyes widening. Rachel. I pulled my mask up higher, but it was too late. She was already walking toward me, her expression shifting from shock to something I couldn't read. Oh my God. Her voice was barely a whisper. You're alive. You're really alive. Lily. I kept my voice neutral, my body still. It's been a long time. 5 years. She was staring at me like I was a ghost. We all thought you were dead. Nathan said. She stopped, her face flushing. I mean, he never said it directly, but we all assumed. You assumed I died. I shrugged. It was a fair assumption. I did disappear. She was still staring, her eyes moving from my face to the pharmacy bag in my hand. Are you sick? Is that why you're here? Just picking up a prescription. Nothing serious. I stepped past her, ready to end conversation. But she reached out and grabbed my arm. Wait, Rachel, please. I need to. She took a breath, steadying herself. I need to apologize. I turned back to her. Apologize for what? For everything. Her voice cracked. For Nathan. For what happened. For the way we treated you. I was young and stupid and I didn't. She shook her head. I'm not the same person I was back then. Neither am I. I can see that. She smiled, a tentative, hopeful thing. Can we talk? Just for a few minutes? I wanna make things right. I should have said no. I should have walked away, gone to the pharmacy, disappeared back into the life I'd built without her. But I was tired, and I was curious, and part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. Fine, I said. Let's talk. We found a quiet bench in the hospital courtyard, away from the crowds. Lily sat across from me, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes fixed on my face. You look different, she said finally. Older. I've aged. I smiled. It happens to everyone. I mean, she stopped, struggling to find the words. There's something different about you, like you've been through something that changed you. I've been through a lot. I didn't elaborate. What about you? How are you and Nathan? She flinched at his name. We're complicated, we've been complicated for years. When you left, he changed. He started spending all his time at work, stopped calling, stopped. She shook her head. It's like he lost something when you left, something he didn't even know he had. He told me he didn't love me. I know. Her voice was soft. I heard him say it. I heard him tell you that he didn't. She looked away. But I never believed him. Not really. I think he was lying to himself. I felt the familiar ache in my chest, the one that had nothing to do with cancer. Why are you telling me this? Because I think he needs to know you're alive. She met my eyes again. I think he deserves to have the chance to... To what? Apologize? Beg for forgiveness? I shook my head. I've moved on. I don't need anything from him. Rachel. I'm serious, Lily. My voice was firm, unyielding. I've made peace with my life, with my choices. I don't need his guilt or his pity or his love. I just need to live the time I have left, in peace. She stared at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't name. The time you have left. Shit, I'd said, too much. It's nothing. I stood, my legs shaking. I need to go. I have an appointment. I walked away before she could ask any more questions, but I could feel her eyes on me the whole way. I was halfway down the hall when I heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, the kind of footsteps that had once filled me with hope, then dread, then a hollow kind of nothing. I turned, and Nathan Harrison was standing 10 feet away, his face pale, his eyes fixed on me like I was a ghost he'd conjured from the grave. Rachel. I stopped. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm, my body still. Nathan. You're alive. You sound disappointed. His jaw tightened. That's not true. Funny. I smiled, thin and brittle. It sounded like it. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning my face, my body, the pharmacy bag in my hand. What are you doing here? Are you sick? Just picking up vitamins. I've been taking them lately, trying to stay healthy. Rachel. Don't. I held up my hand. Whatever you're about to say, don't. I've spent 5 years getting over you. I don't need to be dragged back into the past. Getting over me? His laugh was bitter. You disappeared. You left without a word, without a reason. You made me think you were dead. Because you wanted me dead. He flinched and I saw the hit land. Good. I never wanted you dead. Really? I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. Then why did you treat me like I was already gone? He opened his mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. I didn't wait. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. Behind me, I heard him call out my name. I didn't turn back. I made it to the pharmacy, collected my prescription, and made it home. By the time I collapsed onto my couch, I was shaking so hard I could barely breathe. He knew I was alive. He'd seen me, spoken to me, and I'd let him. I'd been so careful for 5 years, so deliberate about staying invisible, and in one moment of weakness, I'd undone all of it. But as I sat there in the darkness of my apartment, surrounded by empty pill bottles and the faint smell of stale air, I realized something. I didn't care. Let him know. Let him wonder. Let him spend the rest of his life trying to figure out why I left. I was already gone, and nothing he said or did could bring me back. They didn't know what I already knew, but they were about to find out. My apartment was destroyed when I got home. I'd only been gone a few hours. The pharmacy, the hospital, the confrontation I never asked for. But when I turned the corner onto my street, I knew something was wrong. The door was hanging open, the lock splintered, the wood around the frame gouged like someone had kicked it in. I walked inside and felt the air leave my lungs. Everything was gone, not stolen, destroyed. The couch was overturned, the cushions slashed open, the kitchen cabinets were empty, their contents scattered across the floor. The refrigerator was pulled away from the wall, the door hanging open, everything inside smashed or spoiled. And there, in the middle of the floor, were the remnants of my insulin. Glass shards and sticky liquid, the vials I'd carefully stored, the medication that kept me alive from day to day. I stepped over the mess and walked into my bedroom. The mattress was slashed, and my clothes were torn from the closet and scattered everywhere. My photo of my parents, the only one I had, was shattered on the floor. I felt my legs give out. I sank to my knees, my hands shaking, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. This is just a warning. I heard the voice in my head, the man from the hallway, the one who delivered Nathan's message. I'd brushed it off, told him to tell Nathan I wasn't leaving. I'd been defiant, stubborn, proud. Now I was on my knees in the ruins of my life, surrounded by broken glass and the remains of everything I'd built. I reached for my phone and dialed the only number I still had memorized. It rang, once, twice. And then, I told you to leave. Nathan's voice was calm, controlled, utterly without remorse. He didn't sound like a man who just ordered the destruction of someone's home. He sounded like a man who'd made a business decision. You destroyed everything, I said. Everything I had. Everything I needed. You knew I have diabetes. You knew I needed that insulin. Then you should have left when I asked you to. I'm done. Not them. The words came out broken, raw. I have pancreatic cancer. They gave me 3 months. And you came into my home and destroyed my medication, and you don't even care. There was silence on the other end of the line, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. 3 months. 3 months. I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. You get what you wanted. I'm going to die. Are you happy now? Another silence. Then, you should have told me. Told you. I was crying now, the tears streaming down my face. What would you have done, Nathan? You hated me. You spent our entire marriage making sure I knew how much you hated me. What was I supposed to say? Hey, I know you wish I was dead, but actually I'm dying so you don't have to wait much longer? Rachel. No. I cut him off. No more. I should have stayed dead. I should have let you think I was already gone. At least then I could have died, without you making me regret it. I hung up before he could respond. I didn't call the police. What would I say? My ex-husband destroyed my apartment. I had no proof, no weaknesses, just a threat I couldn't prove and a story no one would believe. Instead, I cleaned up the mess, I swept the glass, threw away the ruined food, salvaged what I could. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of my living room, wrapped in a blanket, and stared at the door. When morning came, I did something I've been putting off for weeks. I went to buy a grave. The cemetery was on the outskirts of the city, sprawling and green, the kind of place where wealthy families had been burying their dead for generations. I walked through the rows of headstones, looking at the dates, the names, the lives that had ended too soon. A young woman in a crisp business suit approached me. Can I help you? I want to buy a plot. I forced a smile. I know that sounds strange. Most people don't do this in person, but I wanted to see the place first. She didn't blink. People who worked in cemeteries learned not to blink. Of course. Let me show you our available sections. She led me through rows of marble and granite, pointing out views and shade and proximity to the chapel. I listened, nodded, pretended to care. I didn't want a beautiful view. I didn't want a quiet corner. I just wanted somewhere to go when it was over. We stopped at a small section near the back, where the trees were older and the grass was patchy. This is one of our more affordable sections, she said carefully. The view isn't the best, but it's quiet, and the ground is stable. How much? She told me, and I nodded. I'd been saving for months, hoarding what I could for my disability checks. I had enough. Let's start the paperwork. We walked back toward the office. I was already thinking about what I'd put on the headstone. Not beloved wife. Not loving daughter. Something simple, something honest. She tried. And then I saw him. Nathan was standing at the entrance to the cemetery, talking to a man in an expensive suit. The manager. The man who owned this place. Our eyes met across the grass. His expression didn't change, not at first. He just watched me walking toward him, my paperwork in hand, the woman from the office still chattering beside me. And then he smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but I saw it. The kind of smile he used to give me during negotiations. The one that meant he'd already won. Rachel, he said, his voice carrying across the empty lawn. What a coincidence. I stopped walking. Nathan. Are you looking for plot? The smile grew wider. I wouldn't bother. This entire cemetery is owned by my company. I could make sure you never find a resting place here. The woman beside me went pale. Mr. Harrison, I didn't realize. You didn't realize that she's my ex-wife? He laughed, a cold, brittle sound. Of course you didn't. Why would you? She's been dead to me for years. I felt my hands clench into fists. Nathan, this is between us. Don't drag them into it. Between us? He stepped closer. There's nothing between us. There hasn't been for years. You left, remember? You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. Live with it? I laughed, the sound jagged and broken. I'm begging, not done. And you just told me I can't even buy a grave to die in. He didn't answer, but something shifted in his eyes. Something I couldn't read. I turned to the woman from the office. Thank you for your time. I don't think I'll be buying a plot here after all. I walked away, past Nathan, past his security guards, past all the carefully manicured graves. I felt him watching me the whole way. I found it 3 days later. A small patch of land on the outskirts of town, owned by an old man who'd inherited it from his father. He didn't ask questions, he didn't care about my history or my ex-husband's connections. He just gave me the price and pointed to the spot. "You sure?" he asked. "There's no funeral home, no flowers, just land." "It's perfect," I said. I paid him in cash and left. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I'd done enough. But Nathan wasn't finished with me. It started with small things. My credit cards were declined. My bank account was frozen. My landlord called to say he'd been offered twice my rent to evict me. And then, the invitation. It came in a plain white envelope delivered to my doorstep. Inside was a card, embossed with gold lettering. "You are cordially invited to the engagement of Nathan Harrison and Lily John." The date was in 2 weeks. The location was a hotel I'd always wanted to visit. I sat there, the card in my hands, and I felt something inside me crack. He was doing this to hurt me. He wanted me to know he'd moved on. He wanted me to be jealous, to be bitter, to be everything I'd always been. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I'd spent 5 years learning to let go, 5 years learning to survive. 5 years learning that love wasn't enough, that hope wasn't enough, that sometimes the only thing you could do was keep breathing. I called Lily. "Rachel." Her voice was surprised, guarded. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." I forced a smile into my voice. "I got your invitation. I wanted to say congratulations." There was a long pause. "Thank you," she said carefully. "I didn't know if you'd come." I smiled. "I'm still thinking about it." I went to the bar that night. I've been sober for years. The cancer made it hard to keep anything down. But tonight, I needed something. Anything. The man next to me was young, handsome, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my rent. He smiled when I sat down. "Rough night." "You could say that." He ordered me a drink and I drank it. Then another. Then another. "You look like you're running from something," he said, leaning closer. "Everything," I said. "I'm running from everything." And for the first time in years, I didn't care. I woke up in a hotel room alone. My phone was buzzing on the nightstand. I picked it up, squinted at the screen, and saw a series of texts from Nathan. "You look like you're enjoying yourself." Attached to the message was a photo. Me at the bar. Me, laughing, leaning into the handsome stranger's shoulder. Me, drunk and careless and so obviously not dying. I scrolled down. More texts. "I see you're not as sick as you claimed. Maybe your diagnosis was just a lie. Maybe you've been lying this whole time." I closed my eyes and let out a long, slow breath. He'd had me followed. Of course he had. He'd set up the whole thing, the invitation, the bar, the opportunity to drink too much. He'd wanted to catch me in a lie. But I wasn't lying. The cancer was real. The dying was real. Everything I told him was real. I just hadn't realized that he'd been watching. I made it home. I don't remember how. I collapsed onto my couch, my head pounding, my vision swimming. My body was failing me, the way it always did when I pushed too hard. But I couldn't stop thinking about that photo, about the way he'd looked at me, about the way he'd made me feel like a criminal for simply existing. I grabbed my phone and called the one person I knew could help. "Hey." My voice was shaky, barely there. "I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" "I need you to find out what Nathan Harrison is hiding." The next day, I woke up feeling like I'd been run over by a truck. But I also woke up to a message from my contact. "Check your email." I opened it and found a folder. Inside were documents, photos, and a file that made my blood run cold. Nathan's company wasn't just successful. It was built on secrets, on lies, on things he'd done to people who'd gotten in his way. And one of those people had been me. The file showed that Nathan had been trying to track me down for years, not because he missed me, but because he'd been afraid I'd talk. He'd been afraid I knew too much. The thing was, I didn't know anything. But now I had everything I needed. I heard the knock on the door. When I opened it, Lily was standing there, her face pale, her eyes red. "Rachel, I need to talk to you." "About what?" She stepped inside before I could stop her. "I know about the file." Her voice was trembling. "I know you have evidence. I know what Nathan did." I closed the door and turned to face her. "Lily, I don't." "Just listen." She grabbed my hands. "Please, just listen that I love him. I've loved him for years. But I'm not blind. I know what he's capable of. And if you have something that can bring him down, I'll help you." I stared at her, trying to understand. "Help me? Why would you?" "Because I want out." She met my eyes, and I saw the truth in them. I've been trapped for years. I've let him control me, manipulate me, use me, and I've been too afraid to leave. But if there's a way to expose him, to stop him from hurting anyone else. She squeezed my hands. "I'll do it." I looked at her, this woman who'd taken everything from me, and I saw someone else. Someone broken. Someone desperate. Someone who needed me to save her. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it together." Lily showed up at my apartment the next morning with a bag of groceries and a laptop. "Figured you hadn't eaten," she said, pushing past me into the kitchen. "And we're going to need fuel for this." I watched her unpack eggs, bread, coffee, things I hadn't been able to keep down in weeks. She moved with purpose, a woman on a mission, and I found myself sitting at my small kitchen table, watching her like she was a stranger. "How do you know how to find anything in my kitchen?" I asked. "I've been here before." I blinked. "When?" She paused, a carton of eggs in her hands. "Nathan had me followed you. Before you disappeared, he wanted to know where you lived, who you talked to, what you did. I came here once while you were at work that I just stood outside, that I didn't go in." And you didn't tell him what you found. No. She set down the eggs and turned to face me. I was going to tell him everything. But then I saw your garden. My garden? You had flowers growing in pots by the door at IT with summer, and they were blooming, and I realized, she shook her head. I realized you were trying to be happy, you were trying to build a life. And I couldn't be the one to destroy it. I stared at her, this woman who'd been my enemy for so long. You were going to tell him I was alive? I was going to tell him you weren't a threat, that you'd moved on, that he could let you go. She came back to the table and sat down across from me. I was trying to protect you, Rachel. I know that sounds insane, but I was... Because you felt guilty. Because I knew he was going to hurt you, and I didn't want that on my conscience. I thought about that for a long moment, about the woman who'd taken everything from me and the choices she'd made in the shadows. Okay, I said finally, let's talk about what we're going to do. We spent the morning going through the evidence. Lily had access to Nathan's emails, his financial records, his meeting schedules. She'd been keeping a file for years, she told me, a way to protect herself, in case things went wrong. Look at this, she said, pulling up a document on her laptop. This is a contract between Nathan's company and a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. The shell corporation is owned by a man named Marcus Webb. I leaned closer. Who's Marcus Webb? My brother. She smiled, thin and bitter. Nathan hired him to handle the money he's been hiding. Money that should have gone to his investors. Money that he's been stealing for years. Lily, that's... I know what it is. She closed the file. I've known for years. I just never had the courage to do anything about it. Why now? She looked at me, her eyes full of something I couldn't name. Because he's already ruined your life. Because he's already ruined mine. And because I'd rather spend the rest of my life in witness protection than spend another day pretending I don't know what he is. We worked late into the night. By the time we finished, we had enough evidence to destroy Nathan's reputation, his business, and his freedom. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. The list went on and on. This is enough to put him away for decades, I said. Lily nodded. I know. That's why I need to be sure. Sure of what? That you're going to be okay. She reached across the table and took my hand. Rachel, I know you're dying, but I know you don't have much time. And I need to know that you're going to use that time to live, not just to destroy him. I pulled my hand away. I'm not doing this for revenge. Then why? Because someone needs to stop him. Because I'm the only one who can. The plan came together over the next few days. I would go to the engagement party. I would confront Nathan in front of everyone. I would use the evidence to force a confession. It wasn't the smartest plan. It was the only plan. But the day before the party, I got a call that changed everything. I have something you need to see. The voice on the phone was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Who is this? Marcus Webb, Lily's brother. I know you don't know me, but I know you, Rachel. And I know what you're planning to do. I felt the blood drain from my face. How did you get this number? Lily gave it to me. She told me you were working together. And I want you to know that I'm on your side. Why should I trust you? Because I've been recording Nathan for years. I have conversations, meetings, everything. And I can give you something that will make the engagement party a lot more interesting. He sent me a file. I opened it, and I felt the world tilt beneath me. It was a recording of Nathan and Lily from 6 months ago. She was crying, begging him to let her go. He was telling her he'd never let her go, that she belonged to him, that he'd kill anyone who tried to take her away. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. You think you can leave me for him? You think you can just walk away and start a new life? I destroyed Rachel for leaving me. I'll destroy you too. I listened to it 3 times. Each time, the words hit me like a blow. He destroyed me. He destroyed my life, my health, my hope. He'd taken everything from me and made sure I had nothing left. And he was going to do the same to Lily. The engagement party was a spectacle. Nathan had spared no expense. The hotel ballroom was filled with flowers, champagne, and hundreds of guests in designer clothes. I stood in the corner, watching the show, my heart pounding in my chest. Lily saw me first. She crossed the room, her dress shimmering, her face pale. You came, she said. I said I would. I reached for her hand. Are you ready for this? She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Nathan spotted me 10 minutes into the party. He was across the room, surrounded by admirers, but the moment he saw me, the mask slipped. He made his excuses, excused himself, and started walking toward me. Rachel, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You shouldn't be here. Funny, I smiled. I was just thinking the same thing about you. I'm serious. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. You leave now, or I'll have you removed. You can try. His eyes narrowed. He reached for his phone, but I was faster. Before you do that, I said, I want to show you something. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. His voice filled the ballroom. Unmistakable, incriminating. I destroyed Rachel for leaving me. I'll destroy you too. The crowd fell silent. Nathan's face went white. Where did you get that? I have people who care about me, Nathan. People who don't want to see me destroyed. I looked at Lily, who'd stepped forward, her hand in mine. People who aren't afraid of you anymore. You think this is going to change anything? He laughed, but it was hollow, desperate. This is nothing. I'll bury you both. You don't get it, Nathan. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. I'm already dying. I have nothing to lose. And I'm going to spend every last minute of my life making sure you can never hurt anyone again. The police arrived 30 minutes later. Nathan was taken away in handcuffs, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. The guests scattered, whispering, their phones already buzzing with the news. Lily and I stood in the empty ballroom, watching the last of the chaos fade away. It's over, she said softly. Not yet. I looked at her. There's something else I need to do. I found him in the holding cell at the police station. Nathan looked up when I walked in, his eyes hollow, his face pale. He'd already called his lawyers, I knew, but he wouldn't be seeing them for hours. Why are you here? He asked. To gloat. To tell you the truth. I sat down across from him. You asked me once what I was doing at the hospital. You wanted to know if I was really dying. He was quiet. I am Nathan. I have pancreatic cancer. I've known for years. I left because I didn't want you to watch me die. He stared at me. Why didn't you tell me? Because you hated me. I met his eyes. You spent our entire marriage making sure I knew that, and I was too proud to ask for your pity. I didn't hate you. His voice was rough. I was angry. I was hurt, but I didn't hate you. Then why did you treat me like I was nothing? He was silent for a long time. Because I was afraid, he said finally. I was afraid of losing you, and I thought if I pushed you away, I could protect myself from the hurt. I stood up. Nathan. I'm sorry, Rachel. His voice cracked. I'm sorry for everything. I looked at him for a long moment, and then I turned and walked away. I didn't go home. I went to the cemetery where my parents were buried, and I sat on the grass between their graves. I thought about everything that had happened. The years of pain, the years of silence, the years of pretending I was okay when I was falling apart. And then I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Lily found me an hour later. She sat down next to me, her hand on my shoulder. I'm going to turn myself in, she said quietly. I helped Nathan with some of his schemes. I need to face the consequences. I nodded. I'll be there for you. Rachel, she paused. Are you going to be okay? I thought about the cancer, the pain, the months I had left. No, I said, but I'm going to try. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I spent most of it in the hospital, watching the proceedings on a tablet they'd brought me. The doctors had given me weeks, not months, but I was too stubborn to die in a courtroom. I'd made that promise to myself, and I intended to keep it. Nathan sat at the defense table, his expensive lawyers circling like sharks, but even they couldn't spin the evidence, the financial records, the shell companies, the recordings, it was all too damning. He'd be convicted, he'd go to prison, and I'd be dead before he served a single day. Lily testified against him. I watched her on the screen, pale but steady, her voice unwavering as she described years of manipulation, control, and threats. She didn't hold back. She didn't protect him. She told the truth, and the truth was devastating. When she finished, she looked toward the cameras and said, I did this for Rachel, for the woman I wronged, for the woman who deserved better than both of us. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Nathan was convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 25 years, with no possibility of parole for the first 15. His empire crumbled in the weeks that followed. The company went bankrupt. The houses were seized. The reputation he'd spent decades building was gone in an instant. I heard he'd tried to appeal. I heard he'd begged for leniency. I heard he'd asked to see me one last time. I refused. The last time I saw him was in the hospital. It was a mistake. A nurse had let him in without checking the visitor list, and suddenly he was standing in the doorway of my room, dressed in a cheap suit, his face hollow and his eyes wet. Rachel, he said, I need to. Get out. Please, just. I said, get out, Nathan. My voice was weak, but it carried. You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up at the end and pretend you care. I do care. He stepped closer, his hands raised in surrender. I've always cared. I was just too stupid to show it. Stupid. I laughed, a thin, reedy sound. You tried to destroy me. You tried to destroy Lily. You spent years making sure I knew how much you hated me, and now you want to pretend you cared? I was wrong. He sank into the chair beside my bed. I was wrong about everything. I thought if I pushed you away, I couldn't get hurt. I thought if I kept you at arm's length, I could protect myself. But all I did was hurt you, and I can't take it back. I looked at him, this man who'd been my tormentor and my obsession, my enemy and my everything, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Nothing. No, I said. You can't take it back, but you can live with it. That's your punishment, Nathan. Not the prison sentence. The knowing that you had everything and you threw it away. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The nurse appeared in the doorway. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Please take him out, I said. He shouldn't be here. Nathan stood, his face pale, his hands shaking. Rachel. Goodbye, Nathan. He walked out of the room, and I never saw him again. I spent my last weeks in the hospice. It was a small, quiet place on the outskirts of the city, with gardens and birds and volunteers who read to me when I couldn't read myself. Lily came every day. She'd bring books and tea, and the kind of gentle conversation that didn't demand anything of me. You're doing better, she said one afternoon, sitting beside my bed. The doctors say you might have more time than they thought. No, I said. They just don't want to say the words. I know it's coming. She took my hand. I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm sorry for everything I did to you. You were trying to survive. I smiled, a small, tired thing. I understand that better than anyone. Do you forgive me? I thought about it for a long moment. Yes, I said. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to die angry. She cried then, and I held her hand, and we sat together in the quiet of the room. The end came on a Sunday morning. I'd woken up feeling lighter, the way you do when you finally let go of something heavy. The sun was streaming through the window, and the birds were singing, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Lily was asleep in the chair beside me, her head tilted back, her mouth slightly open. I reached out and touched her hand. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Rachel, I need you to do something for me. Anything. There's a box in my apartment, under the bed. I want you to bring it here. She was back within the hour, the box in her hands. I opened it and pulled out the items I'd been saving for months. My mother's wedding ring, the photo of my parents on their honeymoon, the dried flower from my first anniversary, and a letter I'd written to Nathan, the one I'd never sent. Take these, I said, pressing the letter into her hands. Give this to him, after I'm gone. Rachel, promise me. She nodded, her eyes wet. I promise. I died 3 hours later. Lily was holding my hand, and the sun was still shining, and I felt myself slip away the way you slip into a dream. I'd spent so much of my life running from the past, running from the pain, running from the people who'd hurt me. But in the end, I'd stopped running, I'd stood my ground, I'd faced the truth. And that was enough. Lily kept her promise. She delivered the letter to Nathan's prison cell, along with my mother's ring and the dried flower and the photo of my parents. She didn't stay to see him read it. She didn't need to. The letter was short. I'd written it months before, on a night when the pain was bad, and I'd been afraid I'd never get the chance to say the things I needed to say. Nathan, I've spent my whole life being defined by you, first as the woman you hated, then as the woman you forgot, then as the woman who died. But I'm more than that. I'm more than your anger and your indifference and your guilt. I loved you, Nathan, and I loved you with everything I had. And I don't regret it. I don't regret loving you, even when it hurt, because loving you taught me what I deserved. It taught me that love isn't supposed to make you small, it's supposed to make you whole. I forgave you a long time ago, not because you deserved it, but because I needed to move on. I needed to let go of the anger, and the pain, and the fear. And I did. I let it all go. I hope you find peace someday. I hope you learn to forgive yourself the way I forgave you. And I hope you remember that someone loved you once. Truly, completely, without reservation. Goodbye, Nathan. Rachel. The news of Rachel's death spread quickly. Nathan heard about it in his cell the morning after it happened. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just sat there, the letter in his hands, the dried flower pressed against his chest. He'd been given a chance, and he'd thrown it away. He'd been loved, and he'd returned it with cruelty. He'd been forgiven, and he couldn't forgive himself. It was the kind of punishment that no prison could match. Lily visited me one last time. She stood at my grave, the headstone still fresh, the flowers still blooming. She'd brought my favorite book, and she sat down in the grass and read aloud. Once upon a time, there was a woman who believed in love. She believed in it even when it broke her heart. She believed in it even when it was taken away. And in the end, that belief was the only thing that mattered. She closed the book and looked up at the sky. I'm going to be okay, Rachel. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to live the life you couldn't live, and I'm going to do it for both of us. She left the book on my grave and walked away. The world kept spinning. Nathan served his sentence, alone and bitter, a shell of the man he'd once been. Lily started a foundation in Rachel's name, helping women escape abusive relationships and build new lives. The city moved on, forgetting the scandal and the tragedy and the woman who died too soon. But there were some things that could never be forgotten. The love Rachel had felt, the pain she'd endured, the forgiveness she'd given. Those things lingered, long after she was gone. And they changed everything. 6 years after Rachel's death, Lily went to visit Nathan in prison. He looked older, thinner, his face lined with years of regret. He didn't speak when she sat down across from him. He just looked at her, waiting. I wanted to give you this, she said, pushing a small box across the table. It's the last thing she wanted you to have. He opened it, and inside was my mother's wedding ring. The one I'd left for him, the one he'd never gotten to see. He stared at it for a long moment, his hands trembling. She loved you, Lily said, right until the end. She never stopped. He didn't answer. He just closed the box and held it against his chest. When Lily walked out of the prison, she looked up at the sky and smiled. I kept my promise, she said softly. She felt the sun on her face, the breeze in her hair, and for the first time in years, she felt like everything was going to be okay. Not because she'd found happiness, not because she'd found peace, but because she'd finally let go of the past. The same way I had. The same way we all have to, eventually. I stared at the divorce agreement for 10 full minutes. Christopher sat across from me on the leather couch, his jaw tight, his fingers drumming against his thigh. 3 years of marriage, and he couldn't even pretend to be patient for a single conversation. He'd already checked his phone twice, probably texting her. Are you done yet? His voice dripped with impatience. It's not complicated. I looked back down at the paper $2 million at one-time payment. That was what he thought I was worth. 3 years of my life. 3 years of standing by him while he clawed his way to the top. 3 years of watching his back and covering his mistakes and pretending I didn't know about the women. And now he wanted to buy me out for $2 million. I picked up the pen and added a zero. 2 million became 20 million. Then I slid the paper back across the table. 20 million, I said. That's the price. His eyes widened. You're insane. Am I? I leaned back in my chair. Let's review. When we met, your family's company was in shambles. Your uncle was trying to push you out. Your cousins were circling like vultures. You had nothing except a name that was about to become worthless. And my father stepped in with his money, his connections, his reputation. He made you CEO. He made you someone. His face darkened. I knew I was hitting where it hurt, but I didn't care anymore. The man I'd married had stopped existing 2 years ago. The man sitting across from me was a stranger wearing his face. Without me, I continued, you'd still be begging for scraps from your uncle's table. So 20 million is cheap. It's a discount, actually. I'm doing you a favor. I watched him process the math, watched the anger flicker behind his eyes, then the calculation. He was good at calculation. It was one of the things I'd loved about him. The way his mind worked, always 3 steps ahead. But I'd learned to think ahead too. Your girlfriend is what? 3 months pregnant now. I kept my voice calm, conversational. You want that child born legitimate, don't you? You know what it's like to be the illegitimate one. You lived it. You hated every second of it. You're not going to put your own child through that. He flinched. I'd hit the nerve. Christopher's childhood had been brutal. The son of his father's mistress. Never quite accepted. Always fighting for scraps of recognition. He'd built his entire life on proving he was worth more than the circumstances of his birth. And now he was going to repeat the pattern. His child would be born the same way he was, outside the marriage, tainted by association. 20 million, I said again. Or you can wait. I'm patient. Is she? He stared at me for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. I signed the new agreement an hour later. Christopher didn't look at me as he scrawled his name beside mine. His signature was tight, controlled, the handwriting of a man who'd been raised never to show emotion. Now what? He asked, his voice flat. Now we go to the courthouse. They're open for another 4 hours. How do you know that? I shrugged. I looked it up. He stared at me, and for the first time in months, I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Confusion. Maybe even a flash of something that looked like hurt. You're not even going to fight me on this? Would you prefer I made a scene? Cried? Begged you to stay? I smiled, thin and brittle. I'm done fighting for something that was never mine to begin with. I stood and walked out of the room, and I didn't look back to see if he was following. The courthouse was cold, institutional. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the air smelled like paper and desperation. We sat in separate chairs, waiting for a number to be called, and I watched the other couples filing through. Some of them were crying. Some were screaming at each other. Some sat in complete silence, like us, not touching, not looking, not breathing in the same direction. Eleanor. Christopher's voice cut through my thoughts. I need to ask you something. I looked at him. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity one hadn't seen in years. Who is it? What? The man. His jaw tightened. There's someone else, isn't there? You're not just walking away because of Bella. You're walking away because you found someone. I almost laughed. 3 years of him cheating, 3 years of me pretending not to notice, and now he was worried about me. I haven't found anyone, I said. I've found myself. That's scarier to you, isn't it? He didn't answer, but I saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. When we walked out of the courthouse, Bella was waiting on the steps. She was wearing a white sundress, her hands pressed protectively over her barely there bump, her face arranged in that innocent expression she'd perfected. It was the same expression she'd worn the first time she'd sent me a photo of her and Christopher in bed together. Christopher. She rushed toward him, her voice bright and breathless. Is it done? Are you free? I watched him catch her, his hands on her elbows like she was made of glass. He was careful with her in a way he'd never been with me, protective, tender, the way a man should look at the woman he loves. And I felt nothing. Eleanor. Bella turned to me, her smile sharp as a blade. I'm so sorry it had to end this way, but I know you'll find someone here. She paused, searching for the right word. Professional. Men like that, I'm sure. Professional. I nodded, letting the words sit in the air. That's one word for it. You know what another word is? First wife. The one who got the $20 million payout while you got the used version of my husband. Bella's smile flickered. Christopher's face went dark. Eleanor, don't. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. I turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Bella? When you're posting photos of yourself online next time, maybe don't include the address of the motel you're checking into. IT makes you look cheap. I walked down the stairs and got into my car without looking back. I spent the next 2 weeks pretending I was fine. I packed up the penthouse, box by box. I found a new apartment across town. I changed my phone number and deleted his from my contacts. I stopped checking his social media, stopped searching for her name, stopped torturing myself with photos of their perfect life. And then the nausea started. I thought it was stress. I'd barely been eating, barely sleeping, running on coffee and stubbornness. But when I finally made it to the doctor, the news stopped me cold. 8 weeks. I stared at the ultrasound screen. The small shape was unmistakable. Arms, legs, a heartbeat flickering like a tiny star. That's impossible, I said. I can't be. But I knew when it had happened. I'd been stupid, reckless, angry. I'd gone to a bar and drunk too much and made the worst decision of my life. And now I was going to pay for it. The father? The doctor asked gently. Not possible. I shook my head. I'm divorced. My husband and I haven't. It's been months. I wasn't lying about that. Christopher had stopped touching me a year ago. He'd come home late, smelled like perfume, and slept in the guest room. I'd spent months wondering what was wrong with me, what I'd done, why I wasn't enough. He'd been enough for me. I'd never been enough for him. The father won't be involved. I said, finally, I'll be raising this child alone. I'd always been good at compartmentalizing. I told myself I'd keep the baby. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself I didn't need anyone, that I'd built a life for myself, and I could build a life for a child too. And I almost believed it. But when I saw the shopping bags on my doorstep a week later, designer baby clothes, organic formula, a note in handwriting I didn't recognize, I knew my secrets weren't as secret as I'd thought. I found out about the ultrasound. If you think you're raising this child alone, you're wrong. I'll be there. Just tell me when you're ready to talk. Hush. The handwriting was familiar. The last time I'd seen it, I'd been 18 years old, and a boy I'd known my whole life had given me a letter I'd never had the courage to read. I wasn't ready to talk. I wasn't even ready to think about him. 3 weeks later, Christopher called. It was the middle of the night, and I'd been dreaming about him. The way he used to smile, before everything went wrong. When I answered the phone, my voice was still thick with sleep. Eleanor. His voice was urgent. I need to see you. It's 2 in the morning. I know, but it's important. Bella's gone. She took my money, my car, everything, and I need to know, he paused. I need to know if you'll give me another chance. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Another chance. After everything he'd done, everything he'd put me through, he wanted another chance. Christopher, I said slowly, where did Bella go? I don't know. She just left a note, said she couldn't do it anymore, said she was never going to be my wife, not really, and I realized, his voice cracked. I realized I'd been wrong about everything. I should have been with you, that I should have never let you go. I listened to his voice, and I felt nothing. The man I'd loved was gone. The man on the phone was just a stranger wearing his skin. I'm pregnant, I said. Not yours. I know you're going to say that's a problem, but it's not. It's not yours, and it's not your concern. There's someone else? His voice went cold. Who? Who got you pregnant? That's not your business. The line went silent for a long moment. Then Christopher's voice came back, dark and dangerous. You owe me the truth. I owe you nothing. I hung up the phone. The next morning, I made a decision that I wasn't going to tell him. I wasn't going to let him back into my life. I was going to raise this child alone, and I was going to be better than he ever gave me credit for. I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know that Christopher was going to show up at my apartment later that week, demanding answers. I didn't know that the man I'd been avoiding was going to appear at my door the same night, carrying the baby gifts I'd refused to accept. I didn't know that the truth was going to change everything. All I knew was that I was finally free, and nothing, not Christopher, not the past, not the secrets I'd been carrying, was going to take that away from me. The knock came at 7 in the evening. I'd been staring at the ultrasound photo for an hour, trying to convince myself I'd made the right decision. Keeping the baby was insane. I was 36, newly divorced, with a business to run, and no one to help me. But every time I thought about the alternative, my hand went to my stomach, and I felt something fierce and protective rise up in me. I opened the door, and there he was. Ian Hayes stood in the hallway, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket, his face pale but determined. He was younger than me by 4 years, but the boy I remembered had been replaced by a man, broad-shouldered, steady-eyed, with a kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who you were. Eleanor, he said, I've been waiting for you to call. How did you know where I live? I followed the delivery. He offered a small, sheepish smile. I didn't want to ambush you. I just wanted to make sure you got the things I sent. I stepped back and let him in. There was no point pretending I wasn't curious. No point pretending I didn't remember every single detail of that night. He walked into my apartment and stopped in the middle of the living room looking around. The boxes were still half unpacked, the walls bare. It looked like someone who'd just fled a burning building. You've been through a lot, he said softly. Don't. I crossed my arms. If you're here to offer charity or guilt or... I'm here to offer myself. He turned to face me, his eyes earnest. I know this isn't what you planned, and I know I'm not who you would have chosen, but the baby is mine, Eleanor. And I don't abandon what's mine. I sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. Ian, what happened between us was a mistake. I was angry and drunk, and I was trying to punish Christopher for everything he'd done to me. You were just... The first guy you saw? He laughed, but it wasn't bitter. I know. I was there. I also know you didn't realize what you were doing, but I did. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I don't regret it. I looked at him, this man who'd been part of my life since childhood. I remembered him as a lanky teenager, following me around, always trying to impress me. I remembered the letter he'd written me, and the way I'd crumpled it up and thrown it away, because I'd been too young and too scared to face the truth. You can't seriously want to be with me, I said. I'm divorced. I'm pregnant with a child that's not your... It is my child. He sat down across from me, leaning forward. I know the dates, Eleanor, I know it happened that night, and I don't care about the circumstances, did I care about you? I've been caring about you for years. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about his life, the business he built, the years he'd spent abroad, the way he'd heard about my divorce, and felt something inside him break. He told me about the nights he'd lain awake, wondering if he should reach out, wondering if I'd ever forgive him for walking away after that night. Forgive you? I stared at him. I left you. I snuck out while you were in the shower, and I didn't even leave a note. I was the one who walked away. Because you were scared. He reached across the space between us and took my hand. I know you. Eleanor, did I know you only run when you're terrified, and I know you're terrified now. But I'm not going to let you run again. I wanted to pull my hand away. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I didn't need him, that I'd spent 3 years learning to survive alone, and I didn't need anyone else. But the warmth of his hand against mine was so steady, so certain, that I couldn't bring myself to move. I woke up the next morning and found him asleep on my couch. He'd insisted on staying, just in case Christopher tried anything. I hadn't told him about the phone call, but Ian had a way of knowing things he should know. I stood in the doorway, watching him breathe, and I felt something shift inside me. Not love, I wasn't ready for that, but something that felt like hope. He opened his eyes and caught me staring. Morning, he said, his voice sleep rough. Morning. You look better. Because I slept well. I lied. The truth was, I'd spent half the night thinking about him. The way his eyes had softened when he talked about the baby. The way he'd promised to be there for me no matter what. He sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I have meetings today, but I'll be back tonight. I want to take you to dinner. Ian, you don't have to. I know. He stood and walked toward me. I want to. Let me have this, Eleanor. Let me prove that I'm different from him. I went to my studio that afternoon. It was a small space on the third floor of a converted warehouse, filled with fabrics and sketches, and the smell of creative chaos. I'd built this business from nothing, one client at a time, and it was the one thing Christopher had never been able to touch. I was halfway through a gown for a private client when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Eleanor. Bella's voice was high and panicked. I need to talk to you. About what? About Christopher. About the baby. She was crying, the words spilling out between sobs. It's not his. The baby isn't his. I lied to him. I lied to everyone. I went to meet her at a coffee shop 2 blocks from my studio. She looked different. Pale, drawn, her face free of makeup. The carefully constructed image had cracked, and underneath was just a scared young woman who'd made terrible choices. I know you hate me, she said, her voice trembling. And you should. I did terrible things. I sent you those photos. I called you names. I made you feel small. But I'm not the person you think I am. I know what you are. I kept my voice flat. You're someone who wanted to climb out of poverty and saw Christopher as your ladder. She flinched. That's not. It's the truth, isn't it? You saw him, saw what he had, and you decided he was your ticket out. She was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, that's exactly what I did. She wiped at her eyes. But then I fell in love with him, and I thought if I could just make him love me back, it would be worth it, that he'd stay. That we'd be happy. And now... She shook her head. Now he knows the truth. He found out the baby isn't his, and he threw me out. He told me to get rid of it, to disappear, to never show my face again. And I have nowhere to go. I should have walked away. She destroyed my marriage. She'd spent months torturing me with photos and threats and deliberate cruelty. She'd made me feel like I was worthless, like I deserved everything that had happened to me. But I looked at her, so young, so terrified, so clearly out of options, and I couldn't turn my back. What do you want? I asked. Just a chance. She clutched at my hands, her grip desperate. A place to stay, just for a few weeks. I'll be quiet. I'll stay out of your way, and then I'll be gone. I let her stay in my guest room. It was the stupidest thing I'd ever done. She'd been my enemy for years, and now she was sleeping under my roof. But the pregnancy had changed something in me, softened me in ways I didn't expect. I couldn't watch someone else lose everything the way I had. Ian was furious when he found out. You let her move in? He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Eleanor, she's the reason your marriage fell apart. She made your life hell, and you're just going to... She had nowhere else to go. So, he ran a hand through his hair. That's not your problem. She made her choices. She has to live with them. I know. I met his eyes. But I also know what it's like to be trapped with no one to turn to. I'm not going to be the person who turns her away. 3 days later, Christopher showed up at my door. I'd changed the locks, but that didn't stop him from pounding until I opened. He was wild-eyed, his expensive suit rumpled, his face purple with rage. Where's she? He demanded. I know she's here. I tracked her phone. Not your concern anymore. She stole from me. She took my money, my car, my... He stopped, his eyes narrowing. You're defending her? After everything she did to you? I'm not defending her. I'm protecting myself. I stepped into the doorway, blocking his view. She's pregnant, Christopher, with a child you denied. And while you were busy destroying her life, you forgot one thing. What? I smiled. The evidence is still out there. The recordings, the photos, the emails, everything you ever said about me, every threat you ever made, it's all sitting on a server, ready to go to the press. His face went white. You wouldn't. Try me? I stepped back. Now leave before I call the police. He left. But I knew it wasn't over. Christopher had never been the kind of man who walked away from a fight. That night, Ian came over with dinner. Bella was in her room, and I was curled up on the couch, trying to forget the look in Christopher's eyes. Ian sat down beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. You're scared, he said. I can see it. I'm not scared. I'm terrified. He turned to face me. And you should be. Christopher is dangerous. I've seen the way he treats people who cross him. He's not going to stop just because you told him to. Then what do? He reached over and took my hand. You let me handle it. That's what I'm here for. Not to fight your battles, to stand beside you while you fight them. The baby kicked for the first time that night. It was small, barely a flutter, but I felt it. I reached down and pressed my hand to my stomach, and Ian saw the look on my face. What is it? She moved. I was surprised by the tears springing to my eyes. I felt her move. Ian's hand joined mine, pressing gently against my belly. And there it was again, a tiny pulse, a reminder that I was growing a life inside me. She's strong, he whispered, just like her mother. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if Christopher would come back, or if Bella would stay, or if Ian would still be here next week. All I knew was that I'd made a choice. I'd chosen to stop running. I'd chosen to let someone in. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was finally home.